we're going to start with the Rose Bowl game presented by Prudential, of course, with the San Gabriel Mountains in the background at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. It's number 4 Alabama versus number 1 Michigan. Michigan entering this one at recording as 1.5-point favorites. Last meeting between these two was in the Citrus Bowl following the 2019 season. It was a 35-16 Alabama win. And guys, this one just feels like a big-time matchup that we want to see in a college football playoff semifinal. For all the hoopla over Alabama getting that last spot over Florida State, this feels like the matchup that people want to see, right? Like this is going to be, maybe a ratings record breaker for the college football playoff semifinals on New Year's Day in the Rose Bowl. Just everything that you could ask for, 2 marquee brands. This is going to be a fascinating matchup to watch. And before we dive into it, I do want to point out, we are going to take a little bit different perspective for this preview. We think you guys know the names. We think you guys know, you can research the stats for yourself. We might throw those in there every now and then, but we want to talk about where each of these 4 teams has the edge and where they should be concerned as we enter this 4-team semifinal matchup. So Alabama, let's start with the lower ranked team here in Alabama. We know their season story, 1 loss to Texas way back on week 2. And since then, they've been a completely different team, right? They have gotten over the hump. They have figured out their offensive identity. They have figured out how to stop teams on the defensive side of the ball. Garrett, where do you see the edge for Alabama in this game as they line up against Michigan?
Well, I think Alabama's first and final opportunity here just rests with Jalen Milroe, right? Jalen Milroe is the guy. He's really turned it around back half of the season. Really performing a lot better than he was beginning of the season. He's completed 65% of his passes on the year, 2,700 yards, 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Dude's an athlete, right? And he's probably one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback that Michigan will have played all year, right? There's probably not a better quarterback all year that's been on the schedule. And especially with what he's able to do, extending the play, kind of taking away some of those first chance, second chance, third chance, and being able to take that away from Alabama will be Michigan's key here because Jalen Milroe does that so well, right? He does it so well, just getting outside the pocket and threatening with the legs, threatening to throw it downfield, or something he's progressed at a lot this year. And one of the things that we highlighted on the reaction stream all the way back at the beginning of the month, he's developed as a passer in what has been, I think, one of the best coaching jobs at Alabama in a long time. He's developed so well into a passer who can sit in the pocket, deliver accurate throws. If he's given 10, 15 seconds of play clock to sit in the pocket and dance around like he did at Auburn, he can drop a dime in the back of the end zone and crush your souls. So let's just face it, Jalen Milroe beginning of the season wasn't a very good quarterback, but his progression through the year, combination, with that and what he's been able to do athletically, who he is as a gifted athlete, this is going to stretch the Michigan defense, one of the better defenses in the country, still going to stretch them. And I think that's going to be kind of where the rub is in this game.
The concern for Alabama, though, on the same side of the football, because, this is a different Alabama team than the ones we've seen in the past under Nick Saban. Different offensive identity, different play caller. Same level of athlete, though. Same level of talent. Maybe not as experienced, maybe not as dominant at certain positions, but on paper, it's the same level of athlete. Where they've really fallen short this year of previous teams under Nick Saban is the offensive line. It's been really inconsistent this year. They rank 115th nationally in sacks allowed per game, over 3.25 per game sacks allowed. And we've seen that time and time again this year. A&M, Tennessee, Auburn, Georgia. Elite defensive lines, no doubt. But when that defensive line talent is substantial, when it's a competent pass rush, this Alabama offensive line has really struggled. In Michigan, they're not as elite as they have been in previous years, when they've had the Aiden Hutchinsons of the world on that defensive line. But they're still more than respectable. They're top 40 in the country in sacks generated per game. And they can definitely get after the quarterback with the best of them. They haven't really had to as much this year. They haven't really been in the situations where they need to blitz, where they're facing, a passing attack, where they need to really pin their ears back and go after the quarterback. So I'm really interested to see how, after a month of game planning, Alabama kind of schemes around that. We've seen them be able to scheme around that. We've seen in-game adjustments all year. Can they come out of the gate in this Rose Bowl with a game plan that's going to attack Michigan? And can Michigan adjust? I think that's going to be a fascinating matchup to watch. Mitch, as we look over on the other side of the field, we've hinted at it a little bit, but where do you see the biggest edge for Michigan in this matchup?
Well, it's definitely their defense, right? I mean, Michigan's defense has smothered the opponent's offense all season long. And listen, you can make the case that maybe they haven't played the most aggressive offenses, the best and most well-oiled machines. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, Michigan is taking care of business in a dominating fashion, no matter who is on the schedule. It's not their fault that Penn State forgot how to throw a forward pass this season and complete that. It's not their fault that Ohio State was not in the hands of an elite quarterback this year, right? But every single game that they teed it up, they made the passer uncomfortable. They stopped the run and they forced turnovers. And for me, I look at a critical stat for key games where everything is on the line, third down conversions. Michigan's allowing their opponents to convert less than a third of the time, just over 30% of the time is their opponent getting a first down. So, for me, I look at what their secondary has been able to do. You mentioned their pass rush, not elite, right? Not the Aiden Hutchinsons of the world, but it's been good enough. And there is no doubt that this challenge for Nick Saban and Jalen Milroe is one of, if not the stoutest test that they're going to face all year. I think the best defensive line they faced was Texas in week 2, but I think the best total defense certainly will be on the field in Pasadena this New Year's Day.
For the concern for Michigan, I mean, on the field, they've been fantastic this year. They're beating opponents by an average of 25 points per game. They're allowing fewer than 10 per game on the defensive side of the ball. The offense gets enough done, right? JJ McCarthy moves the ball down the field. The running backs are fantastic. They get it done on offense, and they haven't played a lot of games where they've needed to light up the scoreboard. They're just kind of doing what they need to do. But the concern, if you're a Michigan fan, I think has to come from the history, right? Just every time, it seems like every time they get into one of these big games, they've struggled in out of conference matchups. They haven't really played a big dog out of conference in the regular season the last couple of years. In their last 4 matchups with SEC competition, they're 0-4 and have lost by an average of 18.75 points. So history is not on the side of the Wolverines, but what might be on their side is kind of the last dance element, right? Like that last Michael Jordan Bulls team where they just kind of had the will to win. The world was against them, and they put their heads down and just played for their coach, right? I think they've really bought into that narrative that they are the victim and they are, the hunted in this scenario. So if not now for Michigan, might not ever be in the modern college football era. They're going to keep recruiting. Who knows what's going to happen with Harbaugh after this year, but it's really starting to seem like there's that last dance vibe. But guys, we've broken it down. Who are you taking to win this game outright on the field and advance to the national championship?
Well, I've got one quick question for the birthday boy before we get into that. And maybe Garrett, you can go first and weave this in if you'd like. Are you concerned at all that it seems like maybe some more coaching dominoes are getting ready to fall with the Chargers job being open, Harbaugh having a lot of behind the scenes interest in that, and then LSU might fall apart if Brian Kelly leaves? Like, that's a lot that's kind of bubbling under the surface. I think Trey set it up really nicely with the last dance element, but if your coach is leaving to take another job, it's not like he's retiring. Do you think that's going to factor in at all?
So, look, I'll go ahead and tell you, I think Michigan wins this game. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to start with that. I don't think it factors in. That's a conversation for Harbaugh's agent. That's a conversation for that. Jim Harbaugh's not thinking about that right now. He will think about that at the end of the season. And this is also a narrative that, and I'm going to speak to some of my Michigan fans out there with this one. Michigan fans are so tired of hearing this every single year. Oh, Harbaugh's leaving this year for sure. I heard this job's opening up. He really wants to be the next coach of the Detroit Lions. Oh boy, here come the Chargers. Like, at some point, I'm sure he's going to take the job. It'll probably be this offseason so he can avoid the NCAA sanctions coming from the whole Stallions thing. But at the same time, like, I don't think that this is going to factor into Michigan's play. The last couple of years have not been good for Michigan in the playoffs, right? A couple years ago, they were outmatched by a Georgia team that was frankly better than them, right? They had one of the best defenses of all time, real team of destiny thing going on there. Georgia seemed unbeatable all year. They ended up pulling it off, right? Last year, it was TCU. That was a team of destiny right there. And that was just a matchup nightmare, right? It was a speed versus, kind of a clunky sort of thing. And they really just couldn't overcome that. I will say that there were a couple of calls I think Michigan fans wish would have gone the other way that would have put them in the national championship game. But again, neither here nor there. Michigan's the better team. But I understand. Alabama beat Georgia. That happened. Let's not forget that it took a literal miracle to beat the Auburn Tigers a week before that. That also happened at the back half of the season. Also, looking through Alabama's game logs real quick, they had a couple big wins towards the end of the season, but there was a middle part of that season there where they beat A&M by 6, Arkansas by 3, and then they had a really bad half against Tennessee where it looked like Tennessee was about to roll until Tennessee forgot what a football was and just didn't know how to play football at that point. So when you look at the suspect nature of what Alabama's done this year versus Michigan being perfect, not losing a game, they beat Maryland by 7, not necessarily super impressive. That was end of the season right before they played Ohio State, but they beat Ohio State. They took care of business against the Buckeyes. They went and scored, not an ungodly number against Iowa, but by the way, Iowa went into that game number 3 scoring defense in the country. And Michigan has one of the best defenses, I think, in the entire country. If you had to make me pick just one, it's Michigan's defense is the best in the country right now. And, that's not just because of the experience. It's not just because of the talent. It's because I think there's a hunger on that Michigan side. I think that they just want this, that they want to shut everybody up. The narrative that I've heard recently more than anything else is that, well, Michigan's going to try to run the ball. They hadn't faced a defense like Alabama who can really shut down the run. Michigan gives up like 50 fewer rushing yards a game than Alabama does. I just don't want to hear it. And so for me, I look at this as saying Jalen Milroe is going to have to be next level special to win this game for the Alabama Crimson Tide. I think he's going to put up a great performance. I don't think he's going to get it done. I'm taking Michigan to win this thing by a touchdown, and I think that they're going to take care of business in the Rose Bowl and continue to march on towards the title.
I think we have a chance to have two all-time classics on our hands. I think the next game that we're going to talk about more on the offensive fireworks side, I think this one could be really special in terms of the defense that we see. Trey, I think you and I are picking Alabama for a very similar reason, so I'm going to turn it back over to you. But for me, where this comes down to, physicality matters, and I think Michigan is not lacking in physicality, but oh my goodness, Alabama competed and dominated in the trenches so much more than I thought they would against Georgia. For me, coupled with what Saban does in the playoffs, I will happily be late to the party when someone does knock off Nick Saban, but I'm not going to be the guy that toasts to that first. So I'm going to roll with the Tide in this one.
Yeah, I've learned my lesson in doubting Nick Saban as well. I'm going to take Alabama in this one, and it's literally because of the coaching job that we've seen this year. We've talked about it ad nauseum on the show, off air, on air. We are just so impressed with what Nick Saban has been able to accomplish with his team and his coaching staff this year when everyone had written them off after that South Florida game. Everybody and their mother was doing victory laps. The dynasty's over. Nick Saban's done. He's washed. He's the product of, his modern success is the product of quarterback play. He turned Jalen Milroe into a Heisman caliber quarterback down the stretch this year. And, it wasn't just him. It was his coaching staff, and it was figuring out. I don't think Michigan's going to have a physicality problem in this game. That's the last thing that I'm worried about with the Wolverines and their style of play. I think they're going to have an athlete problem. And I think Michigan's athletes lined up against Alabama's athletes just 1-for-1. Until I see that on the field go in favor of Michigan with a team from the SEC or a team down south, it just hasn't gone well for them in the past. Speed has been an issue, and, this could be the year. But, if you're talking about making me pick this game in a vacuum with what I've seen in history and what I've seen this year, I'm going to take Alabama. Saban's 6-1 in his career in college football playoff semifinal games. His one loss was to Ezekiel Elliott and Cardale Jones, all the way back in the first ever year of the college football playoff. So he's got the track record. He's got the pedigree. I'm going to take him to get one more big win in the semifinal in the Rose Bowl.
I'm going to go one quick warning on this one for the Bama people out here. Okay. And I'm not, direct to trying to do anything, but we talk a lot about not reacting to week 1 or week 2. We should also maybe not react or overreact to the championship week either. I know this is the end of the season. I know that this is when teams are supposed to be hitting their peak. I understand all of that. There was 60 minutes where Alabama beat Georgia, and we took them from they have no business being in the playoff and how are they really going to jump all of that to obviously this is one of the best teams in the country. I think we might be overreacting just a little bit to the Alabama Crimson Tide winning against Georgia. That was a good win. That was a good win. You can't take it away from them. They played the game. They beat, they beat the Georgia Bulldogs. You can't take it away from them. I think we're overreacting just a little bit to Alabama being in that caliber of team.
I don't think I don't think that was, I mean, I could be rewriting history that way, and that's totally fine. But I think the narrative was more if they can beat Georgia, then they've cemented themselves, but that's kind of like the final test to prove if they have or they have not, right? Like they had shown dominance down the stretch other than the Auburn game, and that's rivalry week. Again, we don't want to look at just one game in a vacuum, but rivalry week is crazy. And they had proven outside of that Auburn game that they had, beaten a lot of really good teams, and they had shown a dominant stretches down the stretch of the season. I don't think anyone was doubting. I just don't think that they thought Georgia would trip up in the way that they did. But Alabama forced the issue in that game. So it's gonna be fascinating to see. These are two of the most deserving teams in the country, without a doubt, to use the playoff buzzword.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like PTSD there. I think maybe where we left it before the actual announcement was, well, they're 8th. And so we've never seen a team rise the ranks that quickly. Plus the near escape over Auburn, it kind of felt like maybe folks were penciling in, a 2-loss Alabama team, and they had been mentally eliminated. So I do think Garrett's kind of right. Like I think both sides of this debate have their fair case. Like, have they proven that they're one of the best teams in the country? Like, yes. But also, were we literally 15 seconds away from this not even being a discussion? Also, yes, right?
The point I'm saying is when we got those playoff rankings and Alabama was sitting at 8, nobody had an issue with that.
No,
I don't remember. Yeah. I don't remember a single talking head anywhere saying,
there was a long
"No, Alabama's actually one of the better teams. We really got to consider how they're going to make the playoff." I mean, we had written them off. Georgia's going to win the whole thing, and so they're going to be the 1 seed, obviously. And I understand, like, Georgia slips, so that's like obviously you're done. But like, I'm just still saying, I don't think anybody's like, well, I think Bama should be like 6 or something because they look better than Texas or they look better than one of these other teams. Everyone was complaining about Florida State probably should have deserved it because they were, undefeated, or, they were complaining about maybe Texas being underrated and kind of getting put in that unfair spot, or that maybe Ohio State was overrated because they lost a game. But nobody was really complaining about Bama being 8. And I think it's because we all kind of just knew this really isn't the same kind of Bama team we're used to seeing. This really isn't that dominant Bama team where you look up and down the roster and you see those dogs. Right, it's still a very good Alabama team. They're still coached by the greatest coach to ever coach the game, but at the same time, Trey Burton is not Amari Cooper, right? Like, or Jermaine Burton, not Trey Burton, Jermaine Burton. But Trey Burton's a different guy.
Not either.
No, he's not Amari. No, but Jermaine Burton is not Amari Cooper. He's not any of these top end receivers that have been coming out of it. He's not Jalen Waddle. Like, he's just not that guy. And none of their running backs are Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram, like any of those dudes. And like, that's not to shade any of those dudes. They're just not there in their development yet. And so for me, when I look at this, I'm saying this is a very good Alabama team. This is a talented Alabama team. This is a well-coached Alabama team, but this ain't, 5 years ago Alabama. This isn't 10 years ago Alabama. And so, like, while they're going to compete in this game, they're going to play well, they could end up winning this game. Jalen Milroe has that ability. I think we might be slightly overreacting to the whole, but they beat Georgia, so they obviously they'll beat Michigan. Oh, they're just so much better, so much more talented. I just think that's a little bit of an overstatement for a team in Michigan that hasn't really trailed significantly in that many games so far to this point. They've trailed by 7, 10, something like that.
Garrett's gonna have the victory lap of all victory laps if Michigan wins this game.
Well,
I'll take the egg on my face when they lose too. Like, come on, let's do it.
I love that you lay it all on the line for that. And you know what another interesting element, this will be the last thing I say. This is only the 5th time that Nick Saban has been an underdog at Alabama since his first season.
Wow.
That is disgusting.
I believe he's 4-0 in those games for leading up to this. So lots of narratives,
Do you know when the last time was he was an underdog? Like
the SEC championship.
Oh, okay. Yeah, duh. Okay. Anyways.
For that
last game.
Yeah.
The last one he played, yeah.
All the way back at the beginning of this month. But before that, I believe it might have been 2019 LSU. I could be misremembering that, but it's been.
Well, they would have, if he's 4-0, they'd lost 2019 LSU. So they would.
Yeah, they did.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's
I guess
right.
that wouldn't have been it.
I got to think back. I got to do.
Tigers.
We need a research assistant on the side to look up and fact check us. But
Jamie, pull that up.
Yeah, it is a rare.
If the audience wants us to have these numbers in real time, subscribe. Help us out.
Exactly.
If you'll keep the support going, we can get a guy who can look this up in the middle of the pod.
Exactly. So, I'll look that up in the background, and maybe we'll have that by the end of the show. But we're going to be treated to a fantastic Rose Bowl.
Gracious him! How about